Sometimes it's good for us to go back in the annals of our mind and to think back of where we came from and think about what we were doing before the Lord called us, before we heard and heeded the call of the Lord. And we know that when we look back over our lives, and there's a saying that says that hindsight is 20/20. We know that when we look back over our lives and we see all the things that the Lord has done and the way He's kept us, the way He's guided us, the way even when we weren't paying attention, He was watching over us and strategically placing us in a place that we can come to know Him. Truly, we think that, my God, we have the Lord's favor. For favor is defined as an attitude of approval or liking, over generous, preferential treatment. Let me read that again. Favor is defined as an attitude of approval or liking, over generous, preferential treatment. That means not is it generous, but it's overly generous. So not only is it not what you deserve, but it's more than what you don't deserve. God's favor is upon His children. But we don't always recognize the way that the favor of the Lord is upon our lives. We don't always see the way the Lord is working. Right. For sometimes we neglect to see the bigger picture of what's happening because we get so encumbered by our lives and the situations that we face on a day-to-day basis. We get so tied down by these things, and we think that all our world becomes everything to us, and all we see is what's happening in our world, and we neglect to see the big picture. And the big picture is that we serve a God who loves us more than we can imagine, and He's strategically moving us in a way so that His glory would be revealed in our lives. Yes, right. But sometimes we look at ourselves and we see ourselves, we hear the lies that the enemy tells us about our past and who we were at one point, and we allow that to cloud our thinking. And we allow that thinking to stop us from understanding that God's favor is upon our life. Right. His over-generous preferential treatment is upon us.
That's right.
This story that we read today is a story that no doubt many of us have read before, the story of Esther. But I want us to take a fresh look at this story today. Because Esther was a young girl who was an orphan. So from her perspective, or from others' perspective, her life wasn't worth much. Her parents had died and had left her in the care of her uncle. But this was an orphan. She had no mother or father to tell them how much they loved her. He had no one to care for her and to love her and to watch over her. And sometimes when you're a little child, all you want is the care and the love of your parents. Someone to reassure you, someone to let you know that everything will be okay. She didn't have that reassurance. She didn't have that love of a mother or father to guide her and lead her in the way that she should go. And so when you look at her life, you think, at the beginning, you see this orphan, this one who's been left aside. Sometimes we feel like orphans because we feel as if we have no one to care, no one to love. And sometimes even though there's people around us, people who care for us, there's something about having a mother and a father's love, something about having that closeness. And we feel sometimes, some of us, when Brother Cliff was asking for prayer, the teenagers who are living in single-parent homes. A lot of us are coming from those situations where we feel, even though we had a parent who loved us, we feel that because a father left us or a mother left us alone, we feel that, no one could really love us. No one could really care for us. Because if our own parents had left us or abandoned us, you hear the stories about babies being left in dumpsters. And sometimes we grow up with that pain and those things that scar us and hurt us because we feel if my own parents couldn't love me, how can anyone else love me? And we struggle with understanding the love of God because this father in our natural lives who's supposed to be an example, who's supposed to set the precedent of love in our lives. They were misguided for whatever reason, whether through death or incarceration or just because they just couldn't handle the responsibilities. Sometimes we feel like that orphan child because we feel as if we have no one to love us. But I'm here this morning to tell you that God's favor is better than life. God's favor is better than the love of a natural parent. God's favor is so much more beyond the natural love that we see. But when we look at Esther, when we look at her start in life, one wouldn't think that much would become of her. But even though Esther lacked a mother or father, even though she lacked parents in her life, she had an uncle who believed in the word. He believed in what he was taught. He believed and followed after the law of his people and walked uprightly in all that he knew to do. And with all that he had, he imparted to Esther. He gave example for Esther. See, Mordecai didn't just walk the walk, or he didn't just talk the talk, but whatever he spoke, he lived in his life. So Esther had a living, breathing example of how she should live. She had a living example as to how she should carry herself, and how she should move, how she should react. Right. Many of us, even though we may not have mother or may not have father, the Lord has put people strategically in our lives to be an example to us, to show us how we ought to live. There are many bad examples. When you look at the world today, you see how children gravitate to athletes and to superstars and to people who carry that bad boy persona because they want to be like them, because they see the riches that they have. They see the fame and the notoriety they have. We see in the world so many bad examples. But yet in our lives, I'm sure we can all think back to people who have made an impression on us, not because they were wealthy, not because they were famous, but because they lived right. Because despite the situations that they encountered, despite the fact that they may not have had everything they needed, they still continued to walk upright. See, when you look at Mordecai's situation, he wasn't living in the palace. You see, this time the Jews were in captivity, and so they were scattered amongst their people. They weren't in their own homeland. They weren't amongst their own people. They were scattered abroad in these pagan nations. Right. So they were far away from their comfort. They were far away from home. And sometimes we use that excuse of being far away from home. That opportunity is an opportunity to reinvent yourself and to see what's in you. For when you don't have people around you who know you, it's an opportunity to reinvent yourself. I remember going away to university, and I remember my first semester. It was such a great opportunity because for so long, people had seen me as little Nikki, the shy, naive girl, and people had kind of placed those kinds of expectations on my life. But as soon as I was removed from that environment, as soon as I was removed from the place where everybody knew and expected me to behave a certain way, and I got into this environment where no one knew who I was, no one knew where I came from, no one knew anything about me. It was an opportunity to reveal what was really inside. And I thank the Lord for that, for even though I made some mistakes along the way, He helped me to realize why it is that I walk this walk. Why is it that I follow Him? It's not because of my mother, and I thank my mother, the Lord, for a godly mother who trained me in the way that I ought to go, so that when I'm old, I would not depart from it. But there comes a time in our own lives that we'll be separated from our comfort zone. There's a time when we'll stand alone. We won't be around the people that know us and love us. We won't be around the rest of the church. There'll be times in our lives when we stand alone. That's right. And it's in those times when we see who we really are. It's in those times when we recognize if we were really following the Lord because we love Him or because it's the thing to do, because we were just in the environment. And so many people come to church and they praise and they worship because that's what everybody else is doing. And it's good because we're setting an example. But there's got to be a change. There's got to be something that happens. And I thank the Lord for my sister who decided that she's ready to go down in the name of Jesus, for she has made that decision for herself, not just to come and just to worship because it's the thing to do, but to surrender herself to the Lord. There comes a point in our lives when we have to be moved from our comfort zone. We have to be torn away, and sometimes it seems like it's the worst situation possible. But those situations that draw us out of our comfort zone, they're not easy situations. The situations that draw us from the place where we're comfortable and we're at ease, they're tough situations. But they've come to try us. They've come to test us. They've come to see what's inside of us. They've come to see what we've learned and what we've internalized. You see, when you take a test in school, that's not the time to be looking up the answers. For you should have been paying attention in class. And if you had a question, then you should have asked your question so that you can understand the material, so that you can master the material, so that when the test comes, it's your opportunity to show forth what you've learned. When we're out of our comfort zone, it's an opportunity for us to show what we've learned. And when we look at Mordecai's situation, he wasn't in a zone of comfort, for as we said, Israel was dispersed amongst other nations, for they had been disobedient to the Lord, and so the Lord used these other nations to take them into captivity. But while he was in captivity, while he was away from the homeland, while he was away and thrust into this pagan land, Mordecai didn't forget who he was. He didn't neglect the ways that his parents or those who came before him had taught him.